Brazil is the story of a man named Sam, who works for the Ministry of Records, a department in a fictional dystopian society. The details of how this world came into being is never directly explained. There's no exposition. The people are on a need-to-know basis, and consequently, so is the audience of the film. The country in Brazil is not necessarily even Brazil, it's just a reference to a song. Also, its time period is not referenced except somewhere in the 20th century. What we are seeing is a fantasy, a country out of time and with no particular place. People speak in English and American accents. The fashion appears to be from the 1940s, but anachronistically, there are advanced personal computers and what appear to be robots. The where and when of this is not important. Sam learns that a typographical error has led to the accidental torture and death of Archibald Buttle, an innocent man, whereas Archibald Tuttle, a terrorist or freedom fighter, was the true target. Sam gets mixed up in this, meets the literal woman of his dreams, is captured by the government, and most likely dies. What's fascinating about the state in this film is that it's an organization that exists only to propagate itself. It does not appear to have any contact with outside governments, if any other governments still exist in this possible future. The state creates a kind of bureaucratic labyrinth for its citizens to follow. If you need Form A, it is in Department B, but Department B will tell you otherwise. The film leaves us wondering, is the state malicious or just ignorant? The outcome is the same, of course, but the intentions of the state lead us to what the film is trying to say about our world. If it is malicious, as all the torture references imply, then it is simply a force of malice that exists only to keep ruling executives in power by any means necessary. But if it was made out of ignorance, that may be worse. The mazes of paperwork and departments may have created a way for the more sinister elements of the government to hide its wrongdoings. Several times in the film, state officials refer to life as a game.
I just can't stand seeing the other fellow win. If these people would just play the game, they'd get a lot more out of life.
Terrorists are simply labeled bad sportsmen. This lends itself to the idea that the state simply isn't enlightened enough to understand the value of human life. Film often presents us with powerful, totalitarian entities, impossible leviathans that are somehow overthrown by a courageous individual, someone who stands up for the little guy and wins the day against all odds. It's a kind of catharsis, sometimes childish, sometimes well done. But Brazil does not end that way. Sam dreams of escape from his torture chamber after being captured by the state. We see this big, bold Hollywood charge to freedom, and then he's back. It was a fantasy. Maybe not even Sam's fantasy, but our fantasy. Our expectation. We assumed that he would win because he's the hero, but is he? He's just a man, and the state is so huge, and his individuality is not enough to overthrow the entire community. Brazil is not simply about government overreach or bureaucracy or any other terrestrial matters. Gilliam admits some influence from Orwell's 1984, even considering the title 1984 and a half for his film, but he also admits that he never actually read the book. Brazil is not specifically about government, it's about living in a system in which creativity is controlled. Sam only has his dreams of escape from his dreary life, but he is frequently woken up from them. He dreams of escaping his torture, but even the system takes that from him. A person likes to think of oneself as a complete individual, as someone distanced from the systems and limitations of society, not part of the human factory, the connectivity and facelessness of interaction. Any insistence that the individual is influenced, maybe even controlled through its predetermined, centuries-old social systems, is dismissed for the same reason that people want to believe in free will. The individual, perhaps in the majority, will stand up and boldly say, "Well, not me," as if it were a debate about the person's individual influences and individual thoughts and beliefs rather than an examination of the whole. An impotent cry that speaks to the person's desire to be set apart, to remove complacency, to see oneself as someone above such systems. Free will in such a complex infrastructure feels nearly paradoxical. The assertion of being solely responsible for oneself is also suggesting that the individual is unencumbered by constant influence and powers beyond one's ability to control, as if the individual existed on an island or in the sky, free of outside meddling or choices made around its peripheral. It feels so deterministic, our actions. In a society of complicated social and legal systems, what we consider free will is narrowed due to our free will bounding against the wills of others. Our decisions are less like an open sky, and more like a maze with lots of dead ends. And though that might sound frightening, and it is shown as frightening in Brazil, what it really means is acknowledging a shared responsibility for our world. But we push back against the notion. Depending on our parents, our initial wealth at birth, our outside influences, and other factors, we either benefit or are oppressed by systems that were put in place long before we were even born. It's not my fault, someone will say, taking it as a direct attack.
Information transit. Got the wrong man. I got the right man. The wrong man was delivered to me as the right man. I accepted him on good faith as the right man. Was I wrong?
It's actually fascinating how many people, without realizing it, espouse an almost karmic view of how we fit into society. If things are going my way, then I must be good. If you're down in the dumps, you must not have worked hard enough. It's a common refrain. We love these simplistic outlooks because they falsely assign full responsibility to the individual and never have to take anything else into account. But life is more complicated than that. And though that should be an obvious statement, life is complicated, the symptoms of such complications are often dismissed in favor of some fanciful idea about always being masters of our own souls. This conflict between individuality and collectivism is central to Brazil. It's codified in this joke, as Sam, our protagonist, is asked what he is going to do about terrorism.
Really, Sam? Won't you do something about these terrorists?
It's my lunch hour.
This is the conflict of the film, more than that of the characters, because Brazil is far more interested in its world and its ideas than character arcs. Of course, the concepts of individuality and collectivism are not mutually exclusive, or diametrically opposed for creating a functioning society. Individuals still require contact with others, and communities still require individuals to be part of it to make up its collective. Life is a balancing act. Politicians often create this divide, this notion of individual responsibility against collective responsibility, libertarianism versus a shared society. But like most things, it's not as black and white as that. Personal liberties are important, and the collective good and safety are important. Not one or the other. Both are achievable. Going back to our own free will, recognizing that we are part of such complex systems does not mean tacitly accepting and submitting to being cogs in a machine, like the characters in Brazil, but it does mean that such recognition is an acknowledgement of our connection to everything else, and as such, a responsibility to more than ourselves, more than just our own individualism, but to each other. Brazil paints collectivism as a negative, but only in the extreme. Comparatively, extreme opposition to authority, the nearly anarchic terrorists of the film, bomb innocent people. Sam is a good man by most accounts, but he seems largely indifferent to the plight of others, at least for the first half of the film. Recognition that we are part of complex systems in and of itself is not a good or bad thing. Sam knows he's a gear in the machine, a far more totalitarian system that we, the audience, live in, but he doesn't intend to do anything about this. It's what we do about the interconnectivity of our lives that matters. When people are oppressed, we love spouting off about their personal responsibility because it sounds so righteous, never admitting how much the deck is stacked against so many people. Sam is no fan of the state, but his dreams of flying away from it are only self-serving, not rebellious. It's only when someone he cares about is threatened does he begin to take action, and soon after that, it's too late. In his indifference, he waited too long, and he became just another victim. Hi everyone, a couple months ago I watched all 5 Twilight movies in one sitting and live tweeted my thoughts, allowing my audience to take part in the fun. Well, it was a big hit, as was the subsequent episode, so I'm doing it again, this time with a film series I don't actively hate. It's going to happen on Tuesday, December 22nd. I will be marathoning and live tweeting the first 8 Friday the 13th movies. I can't watch every last one because there are just too many and there are only so many hours in the day. So the first 8. though the episode that will follow, due in about a week, will be about the entire series, even Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. If you want to participate, it's easy. Just follow me on Twitter at Renegade Cut and use the hashtag Friday the 13th Renegade Cut. Easy to remember. I'm going to start around 9 a.m. on Tuesday, only taking short breaks over the course of the day. Everyone who uses the hashtag will have their name in the credits of the episode about Friday the 13th, so please join in the fun, and I'll see you Tuesday.